Now for more on the political battle over student loans, California Congresswoman Karen Bass. Congresswoman, thank you very much for joining us. I know you've been a leader on this. Is this too little too late? Why is the president returning to this issue now? We've only got a month before these rates will double if nothing happens.
Well, I actually think he returned to it quite a while ago. The press conference was today, of course. But, you know, I'm just really concerned. I hear from students every single day. One is because I have a piece of legislation that would cap the interest rates and would also allow students not to pay more than 10% of their discretionary income every month on their student loans. And after 10 years, if they've been paid consistently, a good chunk of those loans would be forgiven. And so I just think this is a critical issue, but I don't think the president's just raising it today. This has been a discussion.
What's wrong with the House Republican approach, which would cap it?
Well, what the House Republicans essentially do is allow the student loan interest rate to be a variable loan, which means it has to be set every year. And then they do have a cap on it. But, you know, for example, what the loans are today, 3.4%, and we know that they're set to double by July 1st. If the market fluctuates, then who knows where the student loan rate will be next year this time. So I think it needs to be capped. I don't think that students should be subject to the fluctuations of the market at all.
And these are the Stafford student loans, the subsidized student loans, who affect the students who need it most. But some educators are telling us that the real issue for most college students are the tuition levels, that cuts in federal and state funding for public institutions have led to tuition increases that are just killing our students.
Oh, absolutely.
What do we do about that?
And you know what, I agree with that completely. And I do remember in the President's State of the Union address, he talked about the fact that colleges need to get together and figure out how to lower tuition, period, because that is, of course, what's underneath all of this. But, you know, the other thing that is happening in the Republican budget, they are calling for cutting Pell Grants. So, you know, at the same time as they want to have the student loan rate be subject to the fluctuations of the market, they're cutting grants for the lowest income students. And it just seems to me to all be consistent with the whole argument of protecting the 1%. People who are millionaires, they don't really need Stafford loans, subsidized, unsubsidized, or Pell Grants. And the issue should be about how does our economy lift people up. And I think that proposals that would increase funding to Pell Grants and cap student loans, period, is the way that we ought to go, while we're working to decrease tuition, which is absolutely the case.
And all of this, the Pell Grants, the student loans, could become really critical depending on what the Supreme Court does on the pending cases on affirmative action, which do affect access for diverse students and for minorities who are so reliant on all of this education aid. I wanted to ask you, as a member of the Judiciary Committee, though, also about the pending confrontation. Eric Holder has been given by the House leadership on the Judiciary Committee till next Wednesday to respond with all sorts of background information and prove what they claim are false statements, you know, prove that he didn't mislead the committee or even commit perjury in a worst case when he was explaining himself, explaining what he did or didn't do on these investigations. What is your position on this?
Well, you know, I mean, I do think that we have to clarify what happened, but I just have to tell you, sitting as a member of the Judiciary Committee, I really felt embarrassed because I think that every few months we have seen Attorney General Holder, you know, summoned up to Congress. I really think that part of this is a diversion. Now, it's interesting because in my first term in Congress, when the economy was really bad, you know, everything was focused on that. And it seems as though my Republican colleagues need scandals, they need other issues to divert us away from the fact that, you know, the economy's doing a little better. And now, what is the reason that we don't have a budget conference committee? What is the reason that we can't come together in the Senate and the House and finally come up with a budget? The first 2 years, all they wanted to talk about was the fact that the Senate hadn't passed a budget. So when I think of Eric Holder and when I think of the other scandals that the Republicans seem to be going after, I just can't help to think that it's not a diversion away from the issue that has them a little confused right now, which is they weren't planning on the economy doing better.
Do you think, since they have the majority on that committee, that Holder's in trouble?
I absolutely do. I do. I mean, I was there, you know, when last year he was held in contempt, the first time in U.S. history. And that's why I said I felt embarrassed, because I think that my colleagues were just disrespectful in the way they treat him. And, you know, I mean, I hope he doesn't resign, but I do have to tell you that I don't know how many times somebody's going to want to be summoned to come up and be berated in the House, which are events that I feel are primarily staged.
And do you think that this is an attempt to just get at the president? What do you think is behind? Do you think Holder has some responsibility, the way he's handled the committee? And what is the motivation here?
Well, I do think that we need to look at responsibility on all parts, but I think that the motivation is to keep the president tied up in scandals. Now, I wasn't in Congress when Clinton was in office, but I sure remember his last term, and tens of millions of dollars of taxpayers' money were wasted investigating everything possible. And I just think it's shameful, because there's so many issues that we need to be dealing with right now. The economy might be getting better, but we still have a terrible need for jobs, and also sequestration, which continues to kick in day by day. I know that in my district alone and in the adjoining district, there's a number of people who are getting furlough notices at a military base. And so we do have real issues, and now that the economy is getting better, we need to do everything we can to help it continue to get better, and to not come up with, you know, diversions such as scandals to tie our time. How many committees need to investigate these issues?
Congresswoman Karen Bass, thank you very much. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.